Here is some news. The Chinese banks just began collapsing. Recently, we have seen reports that China dispatched tanks to intimidate protesters who are attempting to withdraw their money from several rural banks. Videos of unidentified guys beating up bank customers as the police watch have gone viral, even though some have questioned the allegations and instead dubbed it a military drill. Is there a bank run in China? And why are the Chinese banks failing? Here is the story of the Chinese bank collapse. The Chinese bank authorities are now facing an urgent dilemma due to social media virality, dramatic accounts of losses, and demonstrations that are undermining savers' faith in SMBs. The country is currently engaged in a multi-front campaign against financial instability, from shady internet investment scams to a continuing real estate crisis. However, Chinese regulators and policymakers must prevail in the struggle against possible financial contagions and social upheaval brought on by runs on local banks. 3 rural villages and town banks, VTBS, in the province of Henan served as the origin of the chaos. Within a month, there were 3 additional runs on VTBs, including 2 in the province of Anhui. Zhejiang Rural Commercial Bank owns 5 of the 6 struggling VTBs that depositors complained about being unable to withdraw their life savings, which has sparked concerns over the viability of local banks and raised the potential of tiny bank runs around the country. VTBs make up 84% of China's banking institutions, yet as of the end of 2021, they only possessed 13% of the sector's total assets. In 2006, Chinese authorities suggested pilot programs in 6 rural regions to establish these banks as a pillar of microfinance, helping farmers and small enterprises in rural China. The 1,651 VTBs that make up the majority of the banking sector in China today are the result of 15 years of policy experimentation and are all very small and have poor risk management capabilities. On the other side, the People's Bank of China has identified 186 rural cooperatives and 103 VTBs as the riskiest Chinese financial organizations in the country. In other words, the risk level of Chinese rural banking financial institutions is already the greatest globally, and the repercussions might be sustainably worse. The failure of VTBs and other SMBs has led to social unrest, which worries the Chinese government in addition to the financial dangers. Now, Chinese regulators are looking for methods to enhance the efficiency of rural banks. They have worked with 627 high-risk rural SMBs since 2018, handling non-performing loans worth 2.6 trillion yuan, which is equivalent to $385 billion, surpassing the sum for the preceding 10 years. More than 289 rural SMBs received a $19.7 billion injection from the Finance Ministry, the PBOC, and the Chinese Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission, CBIRC. In addition, CBIRC has urged reputable banks, insurance providers, and other fit institutions to participate in SMB mergers and restructuring. SMBs are the most vulnerable component of the Chinese financial system today. However, one of the major structural problems is the absence of ways for SMBs to refuel their capital. They are unable to create replenishment capital due to their poor profitability. And due to their tiny size and bad credit ratings, they can also not raise money through external channels like internal public offerings. However, while they fought for survival with their peers, tiny banks discovered a natural friend in the shape of online deposit platforms offered by fintech companies that were not licensed banks and hence uncontrolled. By offering deposit items online and selling them to its countrywide customers, these platforms, many of which made inflated return claims and some of which have proven out to be plain frauds, brought a constant inflow of cash to the banks over a short period of time. Through such platforms, 89 Chinese commercial banks gathered 550 billion yuan, $81 billion, in internal deposits by the end of 2020, an increase of 127% from 2019. Online deposits have even occasionally taken the place of interbank lending as the main source of finance. The PBOC discovered that some high-risk small banks collected 70% of their deposits from foreign online deposit products offered by third-party marketplaces, while interbank lending as a share of total liabilities fell from 30% to 3.2%. At this point, Chinese authorities forbade commercial banks from offering deposit products through independent internet marketplaces in a notification released jointly by the CBIRC and the PBOC in January 2021, citing worries about increasing hidden risk and the possibility of financial contagion. Many SMBs, with few other options for capital replenishment, lost their life support due to the crackdown on online deposit products. At that point, online deposits had reportedly reached between 1 and 2 trillion yuan. There was also significant worries about financial security. These online deposit products themselves do not pose a threat. Rather, the impact they will have on the rising financial costs needed to support China's defueled economic expansion does. The tight rivalry for deposits among SMBs has been intensified by online deposits, directly increasing their funding costs and reducing their earnings. Therefore, banks have been reducing fees and giving higher interest rates rather than providing higher quality financial products or better customer service, often endangering their financial health. But before the crackdown, online platforms arranged deposit products according to interest rates in declining order, causing banks to boost deposit rates to compete in a manner that brought them very near to the maximum permitted. Some banks went so far as to reduce the length of the interest payment period, offer cash incentives, and give out gift cards for stores. SMBs have been compelled by higher finance costs to engage in riskier activities beyond their meagre risk management capabilities. They frequently had to look for assets with long maturities, significant risks, and insufficient liquidity, which led to both a liquidity mismatch and a maturity mismatch. Small banks are more vulnerable to bank runs during liquidity or credit events due to these double mismatches. These small banks were forced to rely on extremely short-term funding and were always in danger from unforeseen changes in withdrawal demand due to the deposit's flexible durations. So it is not exaggerated to say that failure in online deposit products pose a danger of financial contagion. But how? Well, small banks are legally only allowed to operate in a certain area. But by accepting internet deposits from all across the country, which is against Chinese regulations, they have effectively transformed into national banks. Clients across the country may be immediately impacted by issues at a small bank, raising the possibility of a national panic in times of liquidity constraints. And now, the large commercial banks that control China's banking system are under pressure to hike interest rates due to SMBs offering high-interest online deposit products. Chinese businesses, many of which are state-owned enterprises and private Chinese corporations, saw an increase in borrowing rates due to this spillover impact. Higher borrowing costs for SOEs were thus a result of the increased funding expenses. Surprisingly, despite making up less than a third of the GDP, SOEs are responsible for more than half of China's bank loans and almost 90% of its corporate bonds. And maybe no wonder the government's initiatives to revive the pandemic-affected economy were hampered by rising financial costs of SOEs and private companies. However, the Chinese officials now desire to stop accepting internet deposits. This can be more crucial than maintaining SOEs' low financial costs. It might be tricky. Online deposits also kept ordinary Chinese investors with high risk tolerance away from local government special bonds, which is a financial asset advocated by Beijing. The local government can raise money using this kind of bond to fund significant public initiatives, including public housing, energy, and infrastructure projects. However, the local government's bonds' nominal returns on investing have lagged below those of online deposits. These bonds have an average yield of 3.46%. In comparison, internet deposits have an average yearly interest rate of 4.8%, with some exceptional offers exceeding 10%. And so, how will they promote transparency in local government finance and put a stop to shadow borrowing? Will it be through off-balance sheet financial instruments? As you can remember, in 2015, Beijing first permitted local governments to issue special bonds on their own. Thanks to this revolutionary reform, local governments may now directly collect funds to support regional initiatives, pay interest, and repay the principal at maturity. And by the way, note that most local governments did not have direct access to bond funding before, since China's 1994 budget law forbade most local governments from borrowing. Another important policy shift was signalled when the finance minister Ministry launched the Special Bonds Program and urged individual investors to purchase these bonds. However, due to some rules, the interbank bond market in China has historically only been accessible to institutional investors. On the other side, since Xi Jinping assumed office, he has personally emphasized the value of financial stability, an essential aspect of national security and a vital component of a nation's basic competitiveness. Nevertheless, rather than being too big to fail, let's say China's financial sector currently has too much to ask for problems. Anyway, what will Beijing do next in its multifaceted campaign against financial instability? And do you think we will see a spillover of the financial crisis in other countries? That's all from this video. See you in the next one.